There are a lot of examples that we can pull from history of oppression and dictatorship. We could go just talking for hours on Hitler and Stalin alone. Dash in a little Nero and some of the other Roman emperors. Heck, we might even spend some time talking about a galaxy far, far away from Senator turned Emperor Palpatine. But we're not. Instead, there's a near universal disgust for one such evil. Such evil that we need to address that has been consistent for generations. A group so despised that they are mocked in private, but rarely in public. This evil empire known as the New York Yankees. I know some of you may be scoffing at me and calling me an exaggerator, but trust me on this. I'm being sincere. They are considered the evil empire for a reason. The Yankees and the ownership team of the Steinbrenner family may not be evil like Hitler was evil. They're more baseball evil. They were, still are. The Yankees are a baseball team from New York City, and they have collected 27 World Series titles. And yes, that is a heckin' large amount. In considering the history of them, the run that they went on from 1927 to 1962, that is about 35 years where they won 19 World Series titles. Yeah. Dash into the dominance that they had in the 90s and the aughts with finally developing some of their own homegrown players when they won another 4 titles. Yeah. That's the first prong of the sports prong or hate level of their sports hatred is, well, they're winning. It's considered probably more jealousy for getting it a better accuracy, but the base of it lies is, why can't my team win that much? Why can't my team have that level of players? Why doesn't my owner spend that much money? Then there's a second prong, the second level, buying talent. The Yankees have a history of having top-tier players on their team. Joe DiMaggio, Maris, Ruth, Jeter, so many more in between. That effect alone is hard enough to swallow. And of the few players that they have drafted and developed recently, they mostly have been relying on purchasing, acquiring the top talent in the Major League Baseball. In other words, where the rich get richer. Let's look at this year's team. They already were a good squad, but in the free agency of 2020, they gave a Brinks truck full of cash to the best player in the market in Garrett Cole to make a good team great. The Yankees are a great example of an organization that knows what it wants and does not stop until they get it. It being the World Series. But are they truly evil? Can they stack up with some of the slimiest lowlifes this earth has ever seen? Probably not. After all, it is a really crowded picture, and people like Heyman, who we have been talking a lot about, can't even make the team mention. I think he's like an honorable mention in this team photo. But that's who we're talking about today. Finishing up chapter 3 of the book of Esther as we talk about Haman and his all things hatred for the Jewish people. We have been spending a good amount of time trying to understand the characters of each of these main men of the stories, from King Xerxes to his number 2 in Haman, and of course the middle managements of Mordecai. We have seen the motives behind lashing out of the powerful onto the poor. But as I mentioned last time, we are going to see things from a different perspective today. While we have learned through the actions and motive of Mordecai, in other words, that we should stand up for what we believe in, no matter the cost. Defend what we hold truth the most. Our faith in God. Not opinion, not rumors, not anything that can change, but in God alone. While that should be the action of every believer, standing up in the face of evil, sometimes that's still not enough. Today we're going to see that in spite of Mordecai's defiance, evil still churns away. As we finish chapter 3, we're going to look at the main thought for this section of Scripture as evil will continue, but God will have the final say. Look with me in chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. And when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage to him, Haman was filled with fury. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone. So, as they had made known to him the people of Mordecai, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. So we went over this last time. The words in Hebrew behind these important things, but it helps remembering it again. Haman, over an uncertain amount of time, had his underlings in his government bend the knee, bow, worship, pay homage to him. That's not something Mordecai would do. It crossed a very important line, a very sacred line. Because in my opinion, from looking at Mordecai and looking at other examples from the Old Testament, bowing down is not a problem. Paying respect it probably wasn't a problem. Other people have bowed down and showed respect to other leaders, to other elders. Think of Abram in Egypt when he and Sarai went down there to Egypt quickly and had that weird interaction with trying to sell his wife. Or think of Daniel, Rakshak, and Benny as they were slaves and had in the governments, and they had to show honor and respect to their people in response. Joseph or his brothers, when each of them were in Egypt, Joseph being there a lot longer, all of them paid the appropriate amount of respect to the person over them that deserves it. But nowhere in the law, nowhere in the Old Testament does it say that they were to worship these people. In fact, Exodus 20 tells us that we are to worship God alone. When verse 1 says, "And God spoke all these words, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me." Sorry, Haman, it's right there. You shall have no other gods before me. The consequences of this really neat defiance comes with an evil plan from the twisted mind of Haman. The mass genocide of all the Jews of the Empire of Persia, which included Israel. Look at the presentation of this evil plan to the king, starting in chapter 3, verse 8. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, "There is a certain people scattered abroad, dispersed among the people in all the province of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of every other people, and they do not keep the king's laws, so that it is not to the king's profit to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let it be decreed that they are destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hand of those who have been charged of the king's business, but they may put it into the king's treasury." So the king took his signet from his hand, gave it to Haman the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, "The money is given to you, the people also, to do what it seems to you." All right. Because of Haman's hatred, or as verse 10 says, because of him being the enemy of the Jews, he targets them specifically before the king as a growing problem in the kingdom. Were they a problem? Or is this Haman twisting the truth, being a professional liar? If the Jews were some type of problem, wouldn't there have been a lot of reports, evidence of them being a problem? The only thing that Haman brings with him is a 10,000 talents of silver as influence, as evidence. Let's translate this amount of money into modern days. A talent was a day's wage. So this was 10,000 days worth of work. So you can do that if curious of your own job and your own income scale, how much that would be. But today, a pound of silver is about $285. And that would mean 10,000 talents, or 750 pounds, 750,000 pounds, would bring you around, if my math is right, big if, $213 million. $213 million. That's a lot of money. In fact, that is a stupid amount of money. But this $200 million, Haman having that much money at his disposal to throw away on someone he's upset with, on a tantrum, makes me just ask more questions. How did he get so much money? Is he a dirty politician? Was this really a just open bribe? These are all questions that we can speculate on. But to me, in my opinion, it looks like he was dirty in paying off the king so that he could kill Mordecai and all the Jewish people. This large amount of money that was offered, and eventually not necessary to take, to kill a people group claiming to be evil, makes me think that they were not just as not was Haman's problem. Plus, if Haman gets his way, let's just say he executes all the Jewish people in the entire kingdom, what happens to their land and possessions and things that they owned? Would it go to the soldier carrying out the order? There is no descendants because those people would be Jewish too and they're dead. Would it go to Haman? Would it go to the empire, to the kingdom? Would it end up in Haman's hands indirectly if he is embezzling from the kingdom? These are great questions, and I wish I had answers for them. But it paints us a broader picture of who Haman is. A lot more questionable characteristics of him. Then there's something else. The king approves of this for some asinine reason. And approves, maybe it's the bride, maybe it's just because his number two brought it up to him. But he gives him his signet ring. This ring of the king was given an unlimited authority of the king. If Haman had it, he could have unlimited authority. He could make any stupid law he wanted. He wants no pants Fridays? Done. Tacos only on Tuesdays? Done. Must-see TV back on Thursday nights? Done. Instead, he's taking this unlimited power to kill a people group. Such a foolish man. The king and Haman. And I cannot pass up without pointing this out. The evil that's going on here is real, but there's also a lack of wisdom by the king. Xerxes is not being written, is not being shown as someone who is dripping with forethought, with wisdom. We've already seen his lack of wisdom in the Vashti incident and the letters that went out about that. The author of Esther depicted the king as one whose own wife disobeyed him, and who his leading official, his number two, deceived him. The king doesn't look that good, guys, but we kind of have pointed that out and know that already. But the evil plan has been approved, and now a new law went out in verse 13, 14, and 15 in chapter 3. Letters were sent by couriers to all the king's province with instructions to destroy, to kill, to annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the letter document was to be issued as a decree to every province, proclamation by the people for that day. The couriers went out, and hurriedly by order of the king, the decree was issued in the Susa citadel, and the king sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. So, first I want to point out that the letter that was sent out in the king's name, and then the date of this future mass execution. The proclamation, though, was said to not just kill, to destroy and annihilate. So that's a lot of overkill. Every man, woman, and Jewish child in the empire. Why? This is a huge amount of people. This was not the first, however, empire-wide decree sent out by Xerxes. The first one was issued in chapter 1, as we saw in verse 19 to 22, that we know of, was in response to Vashti saying that she was sacked, she's no longer queen, and you know what? Don't disrespect men, you women. But with this decree of the future death of God's faithful people, his chosen people, evil was running wild. Where not only were the people of God were potentially going to be wiped out through an act of evil, ordained by Satan alone, when it was going to happen is important. Because it's going to happen on what we think of as March 474 BC. Okay. Going back, looking at the book of Esther, I know it doesn't say March. That's my translation of it. As in, the month really is Nisan, on the 13th day. While the proclamation was sent out before that in Adar, this declaration of doom was set to be handled and inscribed one day before the celebration of Passover, which is on the 14th day of Nisan. So, just as the Jewish people would be preparing to celebrate deliverance from the great enemy of the past in the Egyptians, they had to deal with a new plot from a new enemy. And can't you see the evil grin on this turd of a human as he's writing this law, picking the date, scheduling their execution a day before one of their holiest holidays, a day before they worshipped God openly for what he did for them in the past, and remembered. Little did Haman know God had other plans. But these Jewish folk had 10 to 11 months to sit and stew and worry over their upcoming execution. I know how my mind would work. It would wander over how they're emotionally feeling. How would you handle this? How would you handle a notice that said, by the end of the year, you're going to die, thanks to this new law? Can't be changed. What can we as people of faith do in circumstances like these, where hope is unseen at the moment, where evil is running wild over the place? Well, giving up is not one of the answers, nor is lashing out in anger and hatred. But instead, we need to continue to be fervent in prayer, not giving up, continuing to trust our God that he has a plan for our lives. We cannot always stop evil. We live in a fallen world that speaks the language of Satan. But what we can do is stand up for what is right. Hold on to the hope that is in Jesus Christ. Being a Christian is not easy. following God means at times going against what culture indicates, what they say is right, standing up against overwhelming odds. Just look at the believers who stood up to Nazi Germany and all the murders and racist murders of the disabled, the foreigner, the Jewish people. Like those who stand up against the abortion crowd or the mistreatment of foreigners and so forth. Laws can be made good or bad, but no matter what they are, we need to make sure that we follow God first and is what the Word tells us to. Not our opinion of what the Bible says, but God alone and what we stand up to do for them. Our response should be in firmness, what is unmoving of our faith in God. While I know, seeing these ungodly evil actions, things that come down that are like this, angers us, causes us to worry, causes us unneeded anxiety, we still need to remember that God is in control. No matter what happens, no matter what things change in our world. Just look at the book of Job. God allowed Satan to do things to the prophet, like destroy his wealth, his family, his reputation, in hope that Job would curse God. He didn't. Satan could not do these things on his own. That's important because that shows us the need to remember that God can't allow evil to happen for different reasons. Not because he's some masochist or a bully with a magnifying glass on an anthill, but in a lot of cases to see our faith or grow our faith. Look at the example of Mordecai we just seen. A man who was already a foreigner and under a lot of pressure as a foreigner, as a lot of people in our country know greatly. They get a lot of the short straws in society. But he still stands to do what is right and to stand up for God. Not bowing down and worshiping him. Did Mordecai use this as an example to storm the kingdom, take down the king Xerxes and cut his head off? Or just to mope around and live in worry and anxiety and not leave his house? No. Those are not what God tells us to do. A great example from our history would be the response of Martin Luther King through his defiance of evil, but also through prayer and kindness. When he saw the sins and evils of racism, he did it until his life was taken from him. Or what about maybe a lesser known one, Robert Finley from the Christian Aid Mission. Bob Finley is somebody who came to know the Lord in the 1940s and started in mission work with a desire to help other people, especially in the continent of Asia. Finley eventually founded the Christian Aid Mission and had a goal to help indigenous people through giving them life basic needs, so things that we need basically, like food. But more importantly, Bibles in their own language. This organization brought the truth of God into many areas that were not welcomed, where religion, Christianity, was not accepted and even illegal. Many missionaries are still doing that today. And you know what? It's totally worth it. You know what? I can keep going. Let's look at the big hitter, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. This German believer was born in Germany in the same time period when Hitler started goose-stepping into power. Instead of seeing the evils of the Nazi regime, giving up, justifying it, just following along because what else can he do, Diet did the next best thing. He went undercover and he continued to do what was morally right. The first plan of Dietrich Bonhoeffer was one of pacifism. He tried to oppose the Nazis by conducting underground seminaries, religious action, and moral persuasion. Eventually, he switched his philosophy to when he joined the German Secret Service to serve as a double agent. So he got to travel to churches all over Europe because he was supposed to be collecting information about the places he learned. Instead, while traveling to these places, he helped Jews escape Nazi oppression. Dietrich Bonhoeffer eventually helped become part of the plot to overthrow and to assassinate Hitler. Am I encouraging you to see an evil in your town, Illinois, the American government, and try to overthrow them, that person? Oh, absolutely not. But what I am saying from these examples that we have seen throughout the Bible, throughout history, is the need to do what is right and godly while still being the type of respectful for the leadership that we are under, knowing that there will be consequences. Not to live in fear, not to give up, not to let worry and those kinds of sins overtake our lives either. While this world we live in will never be without sin and evil till God comes back. While we still can do what is right when we can. In the cases like these, where laws are passed over our heads and leaves us little to no room to do what is right, what God requires us, we are called to trust God, knowing that He has a plan for this. He allowed these evils to happen for a reason. What the reason is, I wish I could tell you. God is the one that is in control of our days, our country, our future, all things. And that is something we forget easily. I don't care. No, I don't know what Delta is going to do, or Lambda, Kappa, whatever Greek letter that comes up next. Who is going to become president? Who is going to run for any office? What job loss, health problem, family strife, money, lack of money, so forth and so forth. Our lives are filled with stressors. A lot of them being over our head of things we cannot control, cannot change. Just like this future execution that we see in chapter 3 of Esther. But like the book of Esther, for Mordecai and Esther specifically, they had a God who loves them and knows all about the evil that is being carried out, just like we do. God has a plan for our lives and our future. We need to trust Him for it. God is in control. See you next time, my friends.